Hi, welcome. This is Anna Bevan Gravely with NCFREE, and I'm joined by Mario Lomuscio, Republican candidate for the Senate District 15. Mario, is there anything you want to share with us before we dive into the questions?
No, thank you. I appreciate you having me, and I'm very excited to speak with you today.
Cool. So have you ever owned a business or been in a management position within a business? If so, please describe that.
Yeah, I actually started working when I was 16 years old. I started working for minimum wage at a local pizza chain. And by my 19th birthday, I'd worked my way up to general manager. And so I have about 10 years of general management experience within the restaurant industry and the retail industry as well. So I've been the guy working for minimum wage, and I've been the guy hiring minimum wage employees. My responsibilities during that time would have included, general day-to-day operations, cash control, marketing, scheduling, overhead, profit and loss statements, all of that good stuff, general day-to-day operations of the store. And it's precisely that business-minded common sense that I plan on bringing to the Senate seat, and exactly those business-minded, policies that I hope to utilize when everybody is safe and this whole pandemic thing is behind us. I very much looking forward to rebuilding this economy with those very policies and that very mindset to bring us back to that economic prosperity that we were enjoying beforehand.
Awesome. Thank you. Would you say that the current level of federal and state taxation on businesses is too high, too low, or just about right?
Yeah, I actually really like where we are right now. As far as federal is concerned, obviously in 2017, we went from one of the highest corporate tax rates to one of the lowest, went from 40% down to 21%. And we saw the economic benefits of doing that. When we dropped those corporate tax rates, we saw companies giving bonuses, we saw, raises going up, we saw, the stock market skyrocket. It was very beneficial, and we lived through that. We were able to see that direct benefit of a lower corporate tax rate. Ultimately, though, as competitive as we are now, being one of the lower corporate tax rates in the country, ultimately there are still other countries around the world that are much more competitive than we are. So, for example, Ireland has a 12.5% corporate tax rate. I would love to see us get competitive with Ireland. I'd love to see us be down closer to 10% corporate tax rate. And the reason for that is because there are other countries like Japan and Canada, for example, who have a much higher tax rate than us right now, but they've been steadily lowering their tax rate. So other countries are getting wise. They're trying to get in on the prosperity that we've been enjoying. And so it's important to me that we not only be competitive within the market, but we lead the race for economic prosperity and technological advancement. As far as our state taxes are concerned, again, I really like where we are. North Carolina is, I think, the lowest corporate tax rate in the country. We're sitting at 2.5%, and we're constantly ranking in the top 3. I know we did last year. We ranked in the top 3 of the corporate policy index. And so I like where we are, but again, it's no reason to get complacent. I would ultimately like to see us eliminate corporate taxes entirely here in North Carolina. I want North Carolina to lead the way for being a competitive place to do business and to attract businesses. And I want us to be that shining light, that beacon, which will attract businesses and people from sea to shining sea to come and enjoy in our economic prosperity. That's what I would like to see.
Awesome. Do you feel it is appropriate for state and local governments to offer incentives to private businesses in consideration of locating, expanding, or conducting business in a specific location within the state?
No, I don't think so at all. I think that whatever incentive we would offer to a singular business, why not make that across the board and attract all businesses in that same manner? Well, I don't want to put us in a precarious position where we are depending on politicians and bureaucrats to select winners and losers within the market, to offer, incentives within the market and manipulate the market. I would much rather just make any incentives we would like to give to any one business, make that standard across the board, and then allow businesses to compete to get to us.
All right, very succinct. Describe your personal opinion as to what the key principles of free enterprise and our economic system are.
Sure. I think there's 5 key principles to the free enterprise system. The first one is going to be the freedom to choose your own business. I think that each individual should have the freedom to use their own God-given talents, skills, and abilities to pursue happiness in whatever manner they see fit for themselves. That's basically right out of Thomas Jefferson's famous line from the Declaration of Independence, right? We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal. We're endowed by our Creator with certain inalienable rights. Among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. So I think it's monumentally important that we have that freedom to pursue happiness, and we don't have centralized control telling us what business we ought to operate in. Number two, I think, would be private property rights. Obviously, it's going to be incredibly difficult to operate a business if you can't acquire property or you don't have a property to operate a business on. And that line we were just talking about, life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, I'm sure you're well aware of this, but many people aren't, is that Jefferson actually got that line from John Locke in his second treatise of government, except John Locke wrote it, life, liberty, and property. And John Locke devoted a great deal of time in the second treatise of government to private property rights, and there's a reason for that. And the second treatise of government, by the way, was monumentally influential to our founding fathers. And so, again, there's a reason why private property rights play such a huge role in a free enterprise system. Number three, I think, is going to be profit motive. I don't think there is any more proper incentive for a business to operate in the most efficient and effective manner possible with scarce resources at its availability than profit motive. When a business owner has, the personal interest to see to it that he's offering the best possible, innovations and quality products at the lowest cost to the consumer, that's ultimately not going to be just beneficial to the business owner, but it's going to be beneficial to consumers as well. And so if we look at, any company really, you look at Twitter, you look at Facebook, Amazon, Apple, or even back into like the late 1800s, turn of the century, Standard Oil Company, all of these really successful businesses weren't successful because they made a profit. They made a profit because they revolutionized their industries and made it possible for more and more people to access innovative products and services at a lower cost. And so none of that is possible without profit motive. Number four, I think, is going to be competition. I think that each business should have an equal opportunity to enter the market, and that equal opportunity is going to foster a healthy competition. Competition drives quality, and it drives innovation. And then finally, I think consumer sovereignty is going to be the last one. Consumer sovereignty is the power of the individual to walk into a retailer and say no. It's a power of the individual to walk in and look around and say, I don't want anything here. I'll go down the street and see if I can access a better deal for myself. Conversely, it's also the power of the individual to enter into a voluntary exchange for mutual benefit. And so that sovereignty is hugely important. Those are the five that I think come to my mind.
Great. In your opinion, what is the appropriate balance in the scope of federal and state regulatory requirements on business? What, in your opinion, is the best way to balance the appropriate protections without impugning economic vitality? This is a question that is very timely with what we're experiencing now with COVID-19 and having presidential press conferences every day, and having our Governor Roy Cooper making press conferences or hosting press conferences. There's a lot of conversation about this. So what are your thoughts?
Yeah, I think there's three things that we really need to consider when it comes to regulations in the market. The first thing we need to consider is does the regulation uphold or violate the principles that we just talked about? If it's violating those principles, obviously it's a bad policy, we shouldn't do it. The second thing we should look at is the cost and the benefit. Every regulation, every law has a cost and it has a benefit. And unfortunately, it's all too often that we institute a law or a regulation without going back to consider if the costs are outweighing the benefit. And far too often, they very much do. Many of these regulations are put onto the books with the best intentions, but as the old adage goes, the road to hell is paved with good intentions, and I would argue that so is the road to serfdom. And so if we don't take a look at what those intentions actually do, what actual results are drawn out with a proper cost-benefit analysis, then we don't really know whether or not we're helping and hurting. And many of the times, regulations on the books do more damage than good. The last thing we need to look at, I think, is incentives. There are many regulations that get put on the books, and they provide the opposite incentive for their intended effect. And so a good example would, I think, be, let's say rent control in New York, for example. The idea is to provide, affordable housing to the poor, but in effect, the incentives that it provides makes it so that it's even more difficult for the poor to find housing in New York. And it also makes it so that the housing that you do find is often in rent-controlled areas, very much dilapidated and not kept up to date. And the reason for that is because if rent is capped, well, then the business owner, the landlord, has no incentive to keep up the building, to keep the aesthetics of the exterior up. And so we have to be looking at what those incentives do, because those incentives can ultimately be a detriment. Those three things in combination are extremely important to look at. And we need to be really diligent and really detailed. And there are a lot of policies that sound really good on the book, on paper, but then when they're put into practice, they end up doing much more harm than good.
So if elected, Mario, what will be your top 3 priorities as it pertains to the business community?
Sure. I ultimately, I want to do 2 things and a third. And the reason I say it like that is because the first 2 things are what's going to make the third thing possible. I want to cut taxes and regulations. And what that's going to do is foster an economic environment here in North Carolina that is conducive to growth and most conducive to prosperity. Specifically, what I'd like to do is eliminate the corporate tax here in North Carolina. I'd also like to take a look at dropping down the income tax rate, the personal income tax rate specifically. And so the other thing I want to do is cut regulations. And the very first thing I'd like to look at is reforming our occupational licensure laws. There are over 300 businesses in North Carolina that require a license to operate. And I think this is a terrible, terrible thing. And the reason why is because these laws are often put on the books. And they're often argued to be beneficial to the consumer, right? They're argued to protect the consumer, but the reality is that's a lie. If you want to know what these laws are actually intended to do, all you have to do is just take a look at who is lobbying Congress and who is lobbying state officials to put these laws on the books. I'll give you a hint. Inevitably, it is not consumers begging the government to protect them from shiesty business professionals. It is ultimately always going to be special interest within a given industry or lobbyists within a given industry attempting to set up financial barriers that make it prohibitively expensive for other competition to enter into the marketplace. So occupational licensure is used as a tool for crony capitalists to limit their competition. I think that needs to go as fast as possible. Another regulation, this isn't something that I would want to put in place, but it's something that I would like to prevent from happening, is this fight for $15 an hour minimum wage. I think that's a horrible idea. I think there is a large book of economic evidence which will show that that'll have detrimental effects on the very people that it's intended to help. So I will fight as a senator with everything I have to prevent a $15 an hour minimum wage. At minimum, I would love to prevent any hike whatsoever. Ultimately, I think it would be a good idea to get rid of minimum wage laws. And I think there's a good body of economic evidence to support that.
Well, great. This has been super exciting. And thank you so much for sitting down and talking to us. Where can the NC-FREE community learn more about you?
Sure. You guys can find me on my website. It's mario4ncsenate.com, mario4ncsenate.com. It's the number 4, mario4ncsenate.com. You can also look me up on Facebook or Twitter. My Twitter handle is @Mario or Facebook, Mario J. Lomuscio for NC Senate. If that's too much of a mouthful, you can always just search #SuperMarioNC.
Awesome. Thank you so much and have a great rest of the day.
Thank you. You too.